Okay, I think we can start. So, hi everyone. My name is Seville. I'm president of the Canadian Hyper Society. I'm also a social planner at the Waterloo Regional Municipality. I would like to welcome you all who are joining us from different parts of Ontario to the online workshop on power and diversity with Raechele Lovell. This event is part of Diverse Communities Thriving in Equity project. First, we want to acknowledge that the land on which I'm today is located on the Haldimand Tract, land that was granted to the Haudenosaunee of the Six Nations of the Grand River and is within the territory of Neutral and Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. To kick off the event, I would like to give a brief introduction about the organization. The Canadian Helpers Society is a Canadian-based nonprofit organization in Waterloo Region. It aims to empower individuals from diverse backgrounds and to advocate for marginalized and vulnerable groups in our local community. In particular, our projects are directed towards youth and elderly populations, women, and low-income families. We aim to promote well-being and reduce barriers such as racial inequity in the society that impact quality of life. We would like to acknowledge our today's event is supported by Waterloo Region Community Foundation. At this event, we are going to emphasize the importance of creating communities that everyone feels the sense of belonging and encourage you to develop action plans for promoting diversity and challenging power structure in your own environments. A brief introduction to our speaker today, Raechele Lovell. Raechele is the owner and executive artistic director at Diverse Work Dance Company. A bit background about the company. It's an inclusive organization for creativity, growth, collaboration, development, and community, hosting a diverse group of racialized artists where they engage in community performances, regional workshops, and professional development for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color dance artists. She's also the board chair of the Region of Waterloo Arts Fund. Raechele has a very rich background in dance instruction and choreography. She received her diploma in the Performing Arts Diploma, Vocal Music, Drama, and Dance from the Randolph Academy. She currently works primarily as a dance instructor and choreographer, as well as acting, dancing, singing for theater, film and TV, and corporate commercial events. She aims to inspire youth to express themselves through the arts as a positive representation of who they are and who they can become. She aims to touch the lives of people from all walks of life and bring them together through artistic expression. With you, Raechele, thank you so much again for being our speaker today.
Thank you.
With you.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction. As mentioned, I'm Raechele. My day job is primarily within my company, Diverse Works Dance Co., which a lot of us think of as a performing arts company, but I actually think of it as an equity company. And I will explain that as we go along in the webinar. So I'm just going to take a moment here to share my screen. And you all please let me know if you can see that. Uh-oh, wait, I lost you. Wrong screen.
We can say the introduction, yes.
Okay. And you don't see your faces, right? You just see the introduction.
Yes, we can see our, yeah.
Great. Sorry. Sometimes my computer does this weird thing where it like splits the
No problem.
screens. And then I can't see you anymore. And then I can't see my thing. There we go. And now, sorry, now I lost. I have to redo it because now I don't see you anymore.
No
I
problem.
don't see myself anymore. Okay, reopen. Sorry, I had it all queued up and now it jumped off my screen. There we go. Let's try again. Okay, we see now? We see a
Not
screen.
yet.
Introduction? No? Oh,
We
okay.
cannot see it now.
one more time for good measure. Did it pop on?
Yes, we can see the introduction. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so I already got a beautiful introduction, but I would define myself as a Black feminist activist, interdisciplinary theater practitioner, and I'm invested in devising embodied stories of Afro diasporic experiences to share as a reflection for social change through the micro influence of systems in regional communities. So that basically means I'm a Black artist who lives in KW. And I've realized that I can't just exist as a dancer because I have these differences in a white supremacist society. And so I'm really invested in presenting stories that are reflective of me and my identity and my culture as a way to provide representation. And then all of the themes that we present really delve into power, systems, structure, representation, culture. And I'm doing a lot of studies right now about how this influences community. It builds empathy within our society. It provides representation for cultural connection and also creates a platform for other folks to do the same thing so we can really celebrate our diversity. Great. So gonna move you over so I can see my notes. Great. So diversity. I feel like this should be straightforward what this means, but I'm gonna define it anyways because I think sometimes we have different ideas about what diversity is. So for me, diversity refers to the presence of a wide range of human qualities and attributes within a group, organization, or within the broader society. These qualities and attributes can include, but are not limited to, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, social economic status, age, physical abilities, religious beliefs, political beliefs, and other ideologies. So we're talking about, socioeconomic status in terms of the rich and the poor, the middle class. We have diversity amongst how we hold money in our society. We have diversity through how we show up within our different cultural groups and the intersections that we have there. We think about the different ages that we have represented in our society, the difference between the boomers and the millennials and the Gen Ys and the Gen Zs. When we gather those different people into a room, we can consider we have age diversity, maybe we have cultural diversity. So really, whenever we have non-homogeneousness, whenever we have a variety of things, is what I'm defining as diversity. Now, what I want to talk about today is really the difference between diversity and equity. So we have been hearing a lot since these social movements have been coming up. I would say since, the 60s, but let's really define it as since the uprising of maybe Black Lives Matter and Me Too within the 2018 to 2024 kind of era. This is when we start to see this buzzword DEI really presenting itself forward. So I think we've really zoned in on diversity, which isn't just about having different backgrounds and cultures, but about embracing the differences and using them to make our community stronger and more innovative. We see that primarily in Waterloo region. We have a very diverse region here. There's no denying that. When you walk down the street, you can see the diversity that is represented here. And we also see that within our organizations, that we have a lot of diversity amongst the nonprofits and the private sector that exists here. But what I want to talk about is equity and making sure that everyone gets a fair shot, no matter who they are, and leveling that playing field so everyone has the same opportunities. Because just because we have a diverse society does not necessarily mean we have an equitable society in terms of everybody within those diverse groups having a fair shake at success or even just anti-harm here. So by the end of this webinar, you'll have a better understanding of why diversity and equity matter, not just here in Waterloo region, but everywhere. And I want to talk about power and the definition of power for me. So I would define power as the ability or capacity to influence the behavior or actions of others, either through direct coercion, persuasion, or the control of resources or information. Resources and information is really where we're going to focus today. It can also refer to the control or authority one has over others or a situation, and how power dynamics often play a significant role in shaping relationships, systems, and societies. Okay, are we ready to get started? Great, thank you, head nods. Okay. So I want to break down the differences between diversity and equity. I'm off my thing. Next slide. Go next slide. Thank you. Okay, the differences between diversity and equity in this segment. I want to say diversity is about having different kinds of people or things, as we mentioned. And I think about it like having different colors in a box of crayons. So if the people are the crayons, everybody is a person, but we all have our own shades and hues. Some of us mixtures of things, some of us not. Equity, on the other hand, is about making sure that everyone gets what they need to be successful, like having a chair that fits everyone at the table, and not just about having different people around the table. It's about making sure everyone has the same chances to succeed. That means, so if we think about our table analogy, it's not just, do I have different ages? Do I have different ethnicities? Do I have different socioeconomic statuses at this table? Bringing the people to the table is the diversity. The equity is, do the people, did I pull a chair if someone had a wheelchair to welcome them to the table? Do I make sure that a tiny person, like a baby person, has a high chair so that they can be at equal height to the rest of the folks at that table? That's where I think we start to get into the nuances of what equity means and the process of thinking about what needs to happen to the table to make sure that everybody's chair is included and who needs to stand. Do I have any questions about that so far? You can feel free to jump in whenever you have a question. Also, leave your questions in the chat or raise your hand, and I'm happy to answer throughout. But I will leave some time at the end also.
It says we have a question.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
As much as, because anyway, I'm living on the same society, and my knowledge about the society we live, I believe it's not that much bad. Right? The problem that these days we are facing too, it is very good that everybody has the same right, black, white, so on. The problem is that when we are saying any idea welcome, lots of idea, they are not very, very happy. They are not very somebody that you love to meet on your society. I am not going to give name, but some idea is just everybody should be removed. Just we have to be here. I can give you many examples and very precisely. And this can cause to some anarchism that these days we meet. We are saying everybody welcome and everybody coming, no problem. Then, because we are already told them that your idea is great, then they are coming, yes, our idea is great, and it means you have to be, look like, you have to be same as how I am thinking. And this is very serious issues that will cause some anarchism. That these days we can, we around the world.
I mean, there's so much division, right? This is part of the problem.
Not division. This is coming from somebody that they are here to change you. They are here to change you. Maybe today they are not asking you, maybe, but very soon they are going to ask you that you must follow what I believe, or you will face the consequences. We have this problem in when we are talking about diversity, everything good, everybody have same right, but we have big problem and more problem.
Yeah.
I
This is a great point, and I think this is part of the nuance of diversity versus equity, right? So diversity is everyone is here and everyone's idea is valid. Equity is whose voice needs to be heard at this time. Let's think about it. I'll put it in my own context, okay? If I am at a table of diverse voices, and we are talking about what should happen to the school in my neighborhood, and we only consider the voices, or like the teacher from the private school system has a loud opinion and they feel that their opinion is the most valid in the room and that we should all believe their opinion. Are we considering in that moment, and we're going to get into this when we start talking about white supremacy in a minute, but are we considering, like, it's about where we're putting the value. Are we valuing the education, or are we valuing people's lived experiences? Are we taking a moment to check in with the most marginalized people in the room to make sure that their experiences are considered, or are we only taking the expert opinion, right? And this can also be flipped in a different context where maybe we're looking for an expert opinion. We see this like at council, right? The public has an idea, but we have an expert who's done a report and they've spent all of this time and energy and money researching something that maybe the public doesn't have a strong understanding about. We could have a large group of folks who have a belief that are pushing that belief, but it might not be an equitable choice for the community. It might not serve that smaller population or that more niche group. I see this a lot when we do equity, right? We put forward an equity report. It might only serve 1% of your population, but that population is being harmed at this time. The other 99% might say, what's the point of that? It doesn't benefit us. It doesn't bother us. It doesn't matter. It's not worthy. But we're not being equitable if we are not also giving power to that 1%. We're not giving them the success that they need in order to achieve the same metrics as everybody else there.
Thank you.
Does that kind of sort of help? I would love to go back to that. Sorry, I'm just seeing that my computer is quickly dying. I do want to circle back to that when we get through more of the information, because I think it might become a little bit more clear. And I do want to use that as an example, because next up we are talking about examples of what diversity and equity look like and why that's important. So Kitchener-Waterloo, or the Waterloo region, has a complex history deeply intertwined with racism and white supremacy. And this is where I think diversity loses a lot of its power. Is first, we need a recognition that we live it here in our region, in our province, in this country on Turtle Island, in a white supremacist structure. That means that it was built, by the British and the French for themselves, essentially, when it was stolen from the Indigenous folks who lived here. That's just the reality of the facts of what has happened when we remove all of the politics and emotion from it. That's just like the cut and dry version. The systems that we use, the rules that we follow, the policies and procedures that are in place, particularly the older that they get, are written, for a certain. They're written for colonization. They are written for taking the land and making things successful for those folks. Obviously, we are shifting away from this as a society as we acknowledge where we've come from. We include more diverse populations. In the 60s, we invited countries of color to be included. Before that, we had immigration policies that prevented, racialized folks from actually entering into the country. We prioritized wealthy white nations for immigration. And now we're seeing a shift away from that and more of a prioritization towards, refugees and immigrants from other areas. But we have a deep-seated history here where we don't have time today to delve all the way into, but we do have a really complex history in this region specifically. We were historically known as Berlin, a region that has faced great discrimination, particularly against Indigenous peoples, Black communities, and other racialized groups. We are all on the Haldimand's Tract, which is unceded territory of the Six Nations. So we are actively living on land that the Six Nations considers to be their own land. We have a treaty that says it, that you can Google on the internet. You can see how the land we live on is just not really ours. And so we have all of these white supremacist policies that tell us actually it is, and that we don't need to follow our own policies. One of the most significant examples of this history in our region's association is with the rise of Nazism in Canada. During World War II, this area had a sizable German population, which combined with existing anti-Semitic sentiments led to the region being a hub for pro-Nazi activities and propaganda. Specifically in Wilmot, there was meetings for the KKK being hosted up until 2024. So this is something that does exist within our region, as ugly and difficult as it is to talk about. I know it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and sometimes we miss out on knowing this information because we are afraid to talk about it because it is so uncomfortable, and sometimes we don't want to believe that these folks are here. But this is where we get back to losing some of our power, is when we don't speak truth to power, we lose the power to the groups that, exist in hatred. So I'll share a personal anecdote from my own life. In the 90s, my father was the chair of the Race Relations Committee, which is a diverse committee that used to exist here. It was a nonprofit, and they existed out of City Hall. There was a group of 28 members, and they were really building up, working towards anti-racism, diversity, inclusion, all of these types of themes. Recently, somebody sent me a newspaper article, and it had my dad's face on it, and it said, "Local chairman welcomes openly white supremacist Nazi to Race Relations Committee." And so I was like, huh? And it's not from, the 40s or the 30s. It's from like 1992. And so I marched over to his house and I said, "Dad, what is this article about? What were you doing? What were you thinking? Explain this to me." And he said, this man, he was openly KKK. He hosted meetings on his farm for the KKK, which, if any of us don't know, is a white supremacist hate group who is known for, murdering people of color, and particularly Black people. It's along the lines of Hitler's ideology. But more specifically anti-Black, although there is a lot of anti-Semitism in there as well. And he said, this man showed up every single week. He always had his talking points. I heard directly from his mouth what his issues with our community were, and I felt that was beneficial to understanding how to combat racism. I heard it right from the racist's mouth. And our reality is that, I have 16 board members who don't show up every week, but I can always count on that guy to be there. And it really told me something about power, right? And who shows up and who does the work and how that work continues to show up within the systems. So we do have a responsibility as diverse folks to show up in politics, in leadership, in education, in healthcare, in artistry, in all of it, because when we don't, we leave space for other maybe racist, maybe anti-diversity, anti-equity groups to permeate or to exist, to continue to spread that power. So it's not just about showing up at the table, it's about taking up the space, everybody taking up their own space and holding on to their space. And maybe this is where we get into some people being too much and putting their point onto other people, and why we need to develop more resiliency within ourselves, each individual within our society, to make sure that we're taking up our space so other people can't take our space from us. Does that make sense? So I want to talk about what the characteristics of white supremacy specifically look like. I'm just going to give everyone, while I plug my computer in, a moment to take a deep breath, because it's a lot. It's a lot to talk about. Breathe in through your nose and exhale through your mouth, and repeat 3 times. Great. Hopefully you feel like you're coming back into your body with the breath. Okay. So white supremacy characteristics. White supremacy is a belief that upholds that white people are superior to those of other races, especially within the context of racial discrimination and prejudice. This ideology often manifests in social, economic, and political structures that favor white individuals and groups over others, perpetuating systemic inequalities and injustices. White fragility, color blindness, and meritocracy are key concepts that underpin the systems of white supremacy and influence in our social structures and interactions. So let's talk about white fragility. This refers to the defensive reactions that many white people have when their racial privilege is challenged or questioned, right? This is the me, but I have a black friend. Well, I have my Asian neighbor over for dinner once a year. What are you talking about? This is a common symptom that underpins, and this is not an opinion. We have a lot of data about this. We have a lot of studies about this. You can type into Google characteristics of white supremacy. If you are taking notes, that's one that I would recommend that you write down. The characteristics of white supremacy is a proven concept. It's been peer reviewed through many universities. And yes, it is facts. So this concept was popularized by Robin DiAngelo, and it highlights how white individuals often struggle to engage in conversation about race and racism, leading to the perpetuation of racial inequalities, which also takes us into color blindness. That's the I don't see color. I don't even notice that people are different, right? This is also a form of oppression because it takes the power away from our diversity. It doesn't allow us to show up and claim our power with our culture, with our backgrounds, with our intersections, and really show up as who we are. We also see this in patriarchy. We see this in how we silence women and historically have silenced women, right? It's a stealing of power when we don't get to speak our truth. It's usually when we lose the power of our diversity. And then meritocracy is the idea that individuals should be rewarded based on their merit, skills, and effort rather than factors like race or gender. So this means that the university educated white man is more important than the not university educated white man, or that the white university educated person is more important than the Black university educated person. And we are placing our our purpose, on our skills versus on our value, without a recognition that it's a privilege sometimes to achieve those positions, that we do have smart people within our society that can't access university, or that we have systemic barriers that keep people within certain positions and prevents us from considering people's characteristics as opposed to their positions within society. Academic studies such as those of Bona Silva in 2010 and D'Angelo in 2011 provide evidence for the existence and the impact of these principles, illustrating how they contribute to the perpetuation of white supremacy in our society. But understanding these principles is essential to recognizing and challenging the ways in which white supremacy operates in our daily lives. So I have the different symptoms in this graphic that you've been looking at. And I would encourage all of us, as we move through this week, as we move through our lives, to take a few moments to really delve into these different symptoms. Because it's not just white people that, ingest white supremacy. We all ingest white supremacy by living in a white supremacist society. This looks like things like a sense of urgency, individuality, not in terms of like being yourself, but in terms of, like we were talking about before, one person holds the power. That's individualism. Either or thinking, worship of the written word, right? So not considering oral histories, lived experiences. This is a symptom of white supremacy. If I wrote it in a report, it's real. But if I told you, it's not valid. That's white supremacy showing up in a workplace, in an education system, in all of it. And we see this a lot in policy. We see this a lot in politics. Objectivity, fear of open conflict, power hoarding. Progress is bigger and more. Paternalism, perfectionism. If there's any ones here that specifically interest folks and you want to delve more into right now, raise your hand or type it in the chat and I will give you the more specific definition of any of these concepts.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday and the day before, some documents published that Mr. Biden and his friends asked from Facebook, Twitter, and other social media to follow some censorship. It's illegal what they want, but they did it. Is it part of white supremacy or it is not?
It is. It's power hoarding.
Okay, so white supremacy is just a word, a term to many stuff. It doesn't mean white, right?
No, yeah, it's not just white people. It's just, and I think this is where we get confused, right? Sometimes we say white supremacy and people think I'm not a racist, but it's a symptom of the system. It's how the systems are structured, and these are how the symptoms show up. So because we don't learn this in school, because we don't talk about this regularly, we're often not recognizing the symptoms. So my way of helping today in my little 1 hour of power that I've been given is to share these symptoms with you so we can start to recognize where the symptoms are and we can speak truth to them, because the only way to combat this is speaking truth to power. That's how we take our power back. So when we are able to say, like that's a great example, right? We have multiple symptoms there. We have power hoarding. We have worship of the written word there, right? The censorship.
I have these days on the universities that there is some movement. I'm not going to give you a name, but there is a flag going on, and many people, including white people, are in love with this flag. This flag belongs to people that they are in terrorists. They are on drug dealer. They are drug dealer around the world. They are in sex traffic dealer around the world. They are in terrorists. So is this part of white supremacy or this is something else?
I would maybe need the specific context that you're
Well,
referring to. Because if we're
We are
talking
asking
about
you hard
Palestine and
questions.
Israel, like, yeah, that is
We are
white
asking
supremacy.
you very hard
Yes, it
questions
is.
today.
Like,
let me explain. It is the flag of Hezbollah university, white people showing that they are proud of this flag. They are on terror. They are on sex traffic. They are on they are drug dealer, all internationally. So my question is: this part of white supremacy, or it is not?
I mean, it's a long, complex answer. The short answer is yes.
Okay,
I
good.
want to say the long answer is no, right? So it's like there's so much complexities there that would take us maybe more than this 20 minutes to delve into. But I would argue that I see the paternalism there, I see the defensiveness there, and I see primarily the either or thinking that there can't be intersectionalities within that discussion, right? But I do.
Yeah, sorry, I thought like we
No,
are
no,
finished.
jump in. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I think what we are worried, and we are free to talk because we are also from the kind of like similar communities. Like, for example, I look like white, but I'm not white. I'm an immigrant, and I'm coming also from kind of like a marginalized country. So what I think we are all worried, and I can relate kind of what Shane is saying, is giving voice. Okay, we are saying about giving voice, but giving voice to whom is not to not be based on just like those who are marginalized, just for those who are really like, okay, if the voice is here, it's going to benefit the general public. For example, when we talk about the Black community, yes, if the voice is, let's say, if it's going to benefit the general public, yes. But if the voice is going to just start the chaos, for example, in the community, then why should be here? For instance, when we talk about the British, for example, people, if we just raise just for a second the history, and if we just assume it didn't happen, the British people didn't come. If we had like, let's say all indigenous people, we were all indigenous people, and we bring British people and we say, oh, wonderful, we are just diverse. But they start bringing their ideology to the society and then misusing their power. And we are like, oh, it is equity because they were marginalized as British people because we didn't have British people now. And now again, the white supremacy is going to happen. So I'm just like, I think we all are worried as like community who are not Canadian, who are not indigenous for sure, and all we are learning, maybe I'm mistaken, but I think we are all worried that the communities whose voice is not going to benefit the general public might be overheard, and we might all get like, we might be doomed again, but in other way.
There's so much to unpack there. There's so much to unpack. So let's unpack it because I think this is really valuable for everybody. The first thing I hear is the fear and the worry, right?
Yeah.
The fear and the worry about what? About a loss of power within the society. So that's a symptom, right? That's a white supremacist symptom. Then it's like, let's talk about chaos. Chaos for who? Chaos for the general public? Who is the general public?
What I would say is, because I'm coming also from a country which has been, as a woman, I have been forced to have to follow some, let's say, religious ideology which I didn't believe. I'm just worried that, let's say, for example, if let's say if a country is again, if a country changes to be like my country, again, I will be forced to to follow the things that I don't want to follow.
Yes. And this is a form of oppression.
Yeah,
right?
oh,
And
for sure.
so,
That is what I'm
yes.
saying. Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
It
and
is.
so we need to, the first step is recognizing the oppression. There's nothing we can do until we have this conversation. We
Mhm,
have to be in these rooms where we talk it out loud. We need to have spaces for our fear because the fear is real. You can't just tell people not to be afraid, right? We're fearful for a reason. We have these gut instincts for a reason, and it's either because of lived experiences or you had ancestors who had lived experiences. We have all kinds of research and data right now about how DNA actually stores memory, right? And this is a big part of
yeah,
why I believe my dance company is an equity company is like the ancestral stories that come through the bodies that have these lived experiences. It's not just like living in woo-woo land anymore. It's like we can put these cells under a microscope and see how the trauma changes the cell. It changes the DNA and how that impacts our next generations of folks. We can see the slavery in the black bodies, right? We can see the trauma in the Muslim women. Like it's
yeah.
not as political as it sounds when we maybe turn it into this more scientific approach. It's like we know the
100%.
trauma is there, so we have
Yeah.
to talk about the trauma. We have to heal the trauma, and I believe in my dance company that our somatic exercises are helping to heal that trauma. And that's why I think of it as equity work too. But I think it's important to have these conversations to create space for healing.
Mhm,
Then we need to turn those spaces into a call for action that
mhm,
makes sure that we are organizing within our diverse communities to be included in policy, to be included in, governance and strategy to ensure that we use our power to have our voices heard so that we can't have things that we don't believe
mhm,
oppressed upon us.
mhm, mhm.
When I
Yeah.
think of chaos, I think of the right to comfort, right? Who
Mhm,
gets to be comfortable and who
mhm,
considers what that chaos is? Because I would argue that the folks who feel that they need to, I mean, unless it's really hateful, I'm not talking about Nazis right now, right? I'm talking about say a marginalized woman who wants the right to speak but
mhm,
doesn't feel that she has that power,
mhm,
right? Then we are centering the voices of the men by not allowing the voice to be heard. And we're afraid maybe that we're going to make uncomfortableness. That uncomfortableness, that right to comfort, is placating white supremacy. It's about white fragility because the majority of the folks here, even though we have large populations of racialized people, we have lots of immigrants, we have lots of diversity, the majority is still that,
mhm,
initial cohort of white Europeans who came
mhm,
and colonized the land. So
mhm,
I think I would challenge in which context we're thinking about that chaos, that discomfort, that policy, and who are we centering when we think of that? That's where the white supremacy comes in. It's like you might be thinking about yourself, but if you're thinking about yourself in relationship to
mhm,
white power, that's white supremacy.
mhm, mhm.
Hmm.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't allow you to
No, this
talk.
was my question if there's any other symptoms because I know a lot of this language is unfamiliar. And when we think white supremacy, we just think the KKK. And
Mhm,
that is true. They are the extreme version of
mhm,
white supremacy, but then the symptoms trickle all the way down. And it's interesting that it's only, within the 21st century where we're getting to a place where we even welcome everyone to the table.
mhm,
So it's
mhm,
great. We're all starting to come to the table. Now what? What do we do at this table? Can everyone even sit? Right? Do we have enough space? I go back to the table. It's also like who did we prevent arriving at the table because they didn't have a ride, they didn't have food that morning,
mhm,
they
mhm,
didn't have access to a shower, to be clean, to arrive in a socially acceptable, state in order to engage at the table? How are we making people feel when they arrive at that table? That's where we get into the nuances of equity and the lack of having certain people at the table is our loss of power within a diverse society, because we're not valuing people who can't, show up within capitalism properly. And that's white supremacy, right? We're valuing people, money over people. That's not a very indigenous way of knowing, being, or doing. And we are living on indigenous land. So is that really Canadian culture? If this land that we live on the Haldimand Tract is Canada, I would argue that the indigenous knowledge should be considered within our culture. So I challenge, which Canadian culture are we living? The one that includes the diverse voices of everybody who's moved here since the 1960s? Or are we centering that white supremacy still? Because the indigenous peoples had ways of knowing and doing and being for thousands of years before we imparted all of these things in the 17 and 1800s into this society here. Okay. Any other questions about this? I would say make a note. Spend like an hour of your Sunday. Yes, please.
Thank you. Do you have any suggestions on how we can overcome in this kind of situation when someone is mocking on us and we want to speak for ourselves? And for example, we are Asians and other people from other countries laughing on us or mocking at us. So how can we fight them back? Do you have any suggestions on how we overcome this kind of situations?
Yeah. Yeah, my suggestions for any group are always to safety first, right? So find your people and find your power. If you know you're in a situation where you do not have power, you probably don't have a lot of safety. If you're in a situation where you have more power, this gives you more space with your safety. So I say that to say the main thing you can do is use your voice, is you can express. You don't need to be hateful. You can be kind. You can, you're allowed to experience emotions though, too. So showing people your emotions, what you said just hurt me. That hurt my feelings. That's oppressive, what you just said, right? This is a characteristic of white supremacy. Speaking truth to the power, it does take some of the power back. But it's also important to make sure you're safe, right? If somebody is holding a gun to your head, it's maybe not the best time to speak all of your truth because you're not safe in that situation. But if you are within a workplace where you have an anti-harassment policy, you have, a right to equity, you have HR that you can go to, you have the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal, you understand all of that, now you know you have more power. But this is also about education and educating yourself. That's not like, oh, go to university. That's like, use Google, use ChatGPT, ask, cold call people and ask for meetings, for interviews. I do this a lot in town. Hey, it's Raechele from DiverseWorks. I love what your organization is doing. Would you mind having a coffee with me so that I can get the information that I need so I can be informed when I state my truth to that power, right? I can say, actually, that's harmful what you just said because it diminishes my sense of self. That's so different than going to the bathroom and crying. Right? That I took on the harm, but I didn't take back my power in that situation. So my recommendation first is to make sure you're safe. If you are, speak the truth to the power. Let people know. Don't keep things in. We're allowed to do this. We see white men do this all the time, right? We can speak our truth. We can say that didn't feel good for me. That's actually racist, what you just said. Right? Actually, I'm Vietnamese, I'm not Chinese. Those are different places. You can say you're allowed to educate within your own comfort zone, right? Like, I'm Tibetan. I don't consider myself Chinese. You're allowed to say these things out loud, right? You're allowed to, this is how we claim our diversity. Because we tend to erase people's identity and brush people over with a same brush, and that takes our power away. And then the other thing is finding community and organizing together. I think there's more power. Well, actually, I know there's more power in collective organizing than in individualism. And this is why individualism is a principle of white supremacy. Together, we are stronger. In community, we are stronger. Whether that means you found 3 other women in your situation, you found 3 other people from your ethnic group, you found 3 other people from your workplace, you found 3 other people from the internet in a chat room who identify with your experience, having that mirroring back to you, it helps with the gaslighting. It helps you to know that these experiences do happen. I'm not crazy, right? Like we do ingest harm, and talking about it with other people, it helps to lower that harm. And usually in talking about our feelings and feeling the passion of that, feeling the rage of that, feeling the anger of that, it helps us to organize, because we cannot be complacent, unfortunately. We don't get to coast. That's not part of our privilege as racialized, marginalized, young, millennial, women, like all, pick a box and check it. We have a responsibility to show up for ourselves and to speak that truth to power. When we don't do that, we're choosing to give our power away. And that's not to say, I won't lie, like there can be consequences, right? Power doesn't like to be challenged all of the time. That's the reality of where we're living in right now. But I genuinely believe that with these continued uncomfortable shifts, we are slowly crawling towards a more actually equitable future that can provide us all with this level of comfort that some of us within the society have come to know. I think that because we have projected that into our society, that some of us get to be comfortable, we've actually set a precedent that as Canadians, any Canadian, new, old, brand new, been here for 16 generations, we all deserve that comfort. We have the means for it. We're just not spreading it out, and it is possible. Did that help? I know it's not an easy, straightforward, cut and dry answer, but those would be my best suggestions of, it's a practice like anything else. It's a practice like learning how to do a cartwheel. Like first you got to learn to step, and then I need to understand my hands go down. I need to understand the mechanics of that, but then I need to develop the strength to actually kick over. And I need the strength to push. Then when I have that strength that I understand the mechanics, maybe I'm thinking about pointing my toes or making it more beautiful, making it slower, maybe when I get great at it, I'm going to do a partner cartwheel. I'm going to have 2 people connected to each other doing a cartwheel because now we're advanced at it. But I have to start with what is a cartwheel? Yeah. And that's where we're at. That's the reality of where we're at right now. Specifically in our region, I think it's what is white supremacy? Right? What is the difference between diversity and equity? So I've been included in my workplace. Does it actually feel good for me to come here every day? Right? That's I think where the next shifts. That's my offering today, is where are those next shifts going to be? And so I'll just say in our closing, the aspects to consider as you move into the world, your intersectionality. Where do you intersect within all these different systems? We all have a different intersection. Mine is that I'm Afro descendant, but I'm also a German settler from this region. My grandparents lived here when it was Berlin. They're actually quite racist, my German grandparents, but I'm Black. There's an intersection. I'm also a young woman. There's another intersection. I'm also an artist. there's another intersection, right? I'm not just one thing. Where are your various intersections and how do you arrive at that intersection and not just stay in one of these lanes? We want to be at the intersection all the time. What are the power dynamics in your life and where can you reclaim your power? We didn't get into language and communication, so we'll skip that. What is the historical context? So we talked about the historical context of Waterloo Region specifically, right? How did we get here? Where were we coming from? That helps to inform our future. And it's important to know the context of where you are, the context of your room, the context of your home, the context of your street, your block, your region, your country, how that all relates to each other. And in perspective with your global community, right? Just because you're a Canadian doesn't mean you need to leave all of your lived experiences at the airport. That bringing our global perspectives in helps us to shift and evolve into something I believe could be an equitable future for all of us. That is my presentation today. I will accept, we have 3 more minutes. If anybody has any other questions, comments, queries, you want to complain at me, you disagree entirely with what I said, let me know.
We need many sessions like this to talk and get to know them, the material in more detail.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? No. No. Great. It was crystal clear. We're all like, yeah, all these huge concepts, shoo, in my brain.
I think it's just a process of learning and unlearning. We need a bit time to digest, to observe
It's a
our
lot.
environment, digest the impact. So yeah, of what happens in our country or in our living space at the moment. So yes,
Yeah.
there is a lot to learn. Yes,
There's
a
a
lot
lot
to
to learn.
unlearn also.
I'm gonna put this resource into the chat about the white supremacy culture.
That'd be nice. 100%.
And so, you know, when you're like doing your doom scrolling later, or you have a few moments with your coffee in the morning, instead of reading the news, I would recommend take a few minutes to check out something like this. Oh, I just totally closed my window. Okay, well, you got that one.
Raechele, do you have any also source for the like indigenous history? Because most of us, we are unaware of what has happened, and there is a lot, like when you are Googling, there is a lot, and sometimes it becomes overwhelming even when I'm studying it, like what has happened to them, what they demand at the moment. So when we are like doing the total acknowledgement, it's great, but I just don't want it to just be left like, yeah, like just a theory that just we are doing it for the sake of just doing it. I really want like people to learn really why we are doing it even. Yeah, it would be.
So I typed into the chat Haldeman's Tract. That is the land that we are living on. I think it's great to read the treaty. It is available online, but it doesn't show up when you're like indigenous culture, right? Like Google Haldeman's Tract, that will help. The KPL in downtown Kitchener has excellent archives and records. So if you're ever curious to delve more into things, that is a great place to start. Spotify and Audible both have a lot of great resources of audiobooks, podcasts, and different like short clips that are from the Indigenous community. I think the best thing that we can do in terms of reconciliation is to learn directly from the Indigenous community because they know best. Within our region, we have the healing of the 7 generations. We have There's a Grand River. Oh no, the name is escaping me. They work out of 44 Gaukel, and they also have in the SDG factory on King Street in Kitchener. There are Indigenous hubs where you can go, you can visit, you can interact with Indigenous art. So that is a great tool. And I would also recommend taking a visit out to Six Nations. So we live, maybe not accessible to those who don't have a vehicle available, but we do live, within 30 minutes or so of the Six Nations Reserve. And that is a great place to just go and take your body and understand the realities of where we are and the conditions within that our local reserve, Indigenous people are living in. Also, we have reserves, and then we have sovereign nations. So we have, just like within the different stages of colonization within Ontario specifically, we have places where Indigenous people were moved to. So like the folks who should be living here on the Haldimand Tract predominantly reside on that specific reserve. There's another one that's more up north towards Manitoulin Island. Then we have like on Manitoulin, that's a sovereign nation. So they're like, this is still our land. You don't live here. They consider themselves their own country. We have this also out towards Kingston and Mohawk territory and Tyanadinga, right? They don't consider themselves, they're like, you guys are on our land. This isn't Canada. This is Tyanadinga, right? Like they're still using their native language. They have their own laws, their own rules. They're not intersecting within the society the same way. They've escaped that reserve system a little bit differently. So I think my best suggestion is to go and intersect your own body within these spaces and to learn that way.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I will also put my email in the chat if anyone wants to email me or connect with me on social media. I'm always happy to, have chats, go for coffee, answer questions if something pops up later, you want a resource. I'm always happy to provide that for community.
Thank you so much, Jill. It was wonderful. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.